Hi everyone, this is first in the series of tutorials which aim to show you how easily program on Loom network. So, because in fact it's much easier than you may thought. So let's start from creating our own Git repository. Let's go with all the defaults. So here's our repository. And here I want to show you first tool we are about to use, which allows us to program without installing practically any software. I believe that's the URL. So that's a Git pod. It will start Docker container in our repository. Okay, I need to log in with GitHub and launch. As you can see. Now, I prepared something called Truffle box. It's based on one of Loom tutorials with some little fixes and some little extensions which will make it more clear. And I'm gonna use it. You will see how easy it is to set up a working project with the use of this Truffle box. So here is a command line. That's a Linux environment. Here we have also a code editor, all in browser. So all you need to have is a Chrome browser. Now, first we need to install Truffle. E is for install, G is for global. So it will be installed in a whole system, accessible from a whole system. Okay, so Truffle is installing. Actually, this process will be pretty fast since most probably Gitpod has this libraries already cached, as you can see. So now we can unbox our repository. So it's under Loom tutorials, Truffle Loom starter. Let's unbox it, paste it here. It might take a second. Yes, please overwrite whatever was in the folder. So as you see, all files are downloaded. Now it's setting up, which means it's running yarn install, and that will take a moment since there is a lot of packages dependent. For instance, Web3.js, for instance, Loom.js, Loom Truffle provider, and so on and so forth, quite a few. So this process will take a moment. Let's wait for it to finish. We can already see node modules. So we need to wait just for a little more. In the meantime, we can access README. And if you like more clear way of displaying it, we can see, okay, the process has finished, but let's take a quick look on the README file. So there are xdev mnemonic. There are two files. One is xdev mnemonic, other is mainnet mnemonic. Xdev mnemonic is filled with some default values. Mainnet mnemonic is, of course, left blank since I will not reveal to you my mainnet deployment address. But how to actually get one? So here's a link: dashboard chains.com add key. So it's opened, I believe, somewhere here. Exactly, dashboards the app chain, and here we have deploying to Plasma chain, and here we have generate new key. And that will allow us, that's the mnemonic we can use to make a deployment. If we activate this mnemonic here, spending 1,400 looms for that, we will be able to deploy not only on testnet, but also on mainnet. So just to prove that it works, let's put this mnemonic into xdev. Okay, now Truffle Unbox has this very nice feature that it allows you to specify things or commands for the user. So if we read that, we can see that there are several commands we can use right away. So let's try them out. First is yarn deploy reset, which means that if something was deployed under this mnemonic, it will overwrite it. So enter, and now deployment starts. Again, we need to wait a moment, but actually not so long, since Loom is much less clocked than Ethereum and has smaller block times. So let's wait for the deployment. Migration. There is it's of course very, very simple tutorial, only with migrations and simple storage contract, and some front-end React, which I will show in a moment. So, okay, deployment is finished. So now, as we can see, yarn serve xdev. So let's try it out. So we are running, and Gitpod says that we have tried to host under 8080 port without having it open. So we need to instruct it open and open in a browser. That should take a moment. But okay, so it's here. So let's put the value to 10. Wait for a second. And if we take this transaction hash and go to the blockchain explorer, which is specified here actually, so xdev blockchain explorer, okay, maybe I will do that this way. And write this and paste this hash, then we can see that this transaction really happened on the testnet 30 seconds ago. And the value is set. Okay, let's take a closer look. For instance, let's write here 11, confirm. And we see new transaction, but for some reason here we see still value 10. Is it smart contract issue or app issue? Well, it turns out that in that example, because actually this app is being taken from the from Loom tutorials repository, and just as I said, fixed a little bit here and there, just to make it up to date with the latest state of the network. So if we go to contracts, the source folder contains full React app. If we go to index, we see React and contract imported and React DOM imported and a whole app being built or bootstrapped. So let's take a look on contract. Actually, we can see, well, let's start from the beginning. So how all of that works. So the important part is Loom.js, which is a Loom-specific library which creates Web3 abstraction over whole Loom blockchain. And we have objects like client, like local address, some utilities, and Loom provider. So what this is all about? Client is an object which allow us to call the blockchain, so to communicate with the blockchain. To do so, we need to provide web service endpoints, and for mainnet, that's the proper URLs, plasma.deappchain.com, and for testnet, proper URLs are xdev plasma us1 deappchain.com. One important note, if we run, as in this case, on HTTPS, we need to reference here WSS endpoint, not WS endpoint. Otherwise, it will not work since because of the HTTPS and HTTP mismatch. So that's our proper endpoint. And with this endpoint, we create our client. And this client is actually supplied to Loom provider, which is like, if you are familiar with Web3 and things like Web3 RPC provider, stuff like that. It's a kind of provider which wraps all the functionalities of Loom into interface that is consumable for Web3. So now we have normal, ordinary Web3 1.0 object, and we can call it accordingly. So we supply ABI, which means application binary interface, put the current address, which was taken from a simple store. It's an artifact of the compilation. So we can see the JSON here. It was created during, that's for everyone who ever used Truffle, that's a very familiar, well-known file. And if we take a quick look into Truffle config, we will see that there is build directory set to source contracts. So these artifacts then can be loaded by React app to see what the addresses are, what the API is, and so on and so forth. And for instance, here we see that there is an event which is being read, but there is a filter that only if the value is 10, then the whole callback is being called. So let's remove it. As we see, we have hot reload. Now here, let's set value like 11. And maybe we should do reload first. So let's put the value 12. And we see value 12 here. Let's put value 47. And we see this funny information, which is actually around here. That's the effect of this code. Okay, so that's shortly how it works. I will not explain all the React part. I assume that you know some basics of Web3 programming and some basics of web programming. If that's not the case, then there is Crypto Zombies tutorial, which is also created by the Loom company, which explains in details and in very easy, understandable language how to actually write this Web3 app, so decentralized application, with the use of Loom. So I encourage you to go here if you do not have sufficient the app programming skills. Okay, so what's more in here? Let's take a look for a second for a Truffle config, because that's another custom thing here, which is not which is specific to Loom blockchain, and that's the way the keys are created and the way provider is created for the deployment. So here we see xdef plus my US1, and that was exactly the type of network which was called during yarn deploy reset xdef. So here is its configuration. Another is Loom the app chain. So we have chain ID, we have these URLs I mentioned before. Mine here is HTTP, since the deployer do not need to run on HTTPS. Let's go forward. Here we load mnemonic path from mnemonic from file and create a Loom Truffle provider. If we take a fast look how it is created, we can see that simply the content of file has been read, and then the object is instantiated. So that's actually pretty easy. Okay, so that will be all if it comes to Loom specific parts. That is a first of a series of tutorials. Next tutorial will be how use ERC721 bridge on Loom network. So how to send between Ethereum mainnet and Loom blockchain ERC721 token. Then the third tutorial will be how, based on that, do actually arbitrary message bridge. So how to trustlessly call any function in a smart contract on the mainnet by calling the related function on Loom network, and vice versa. So you will be able, you can imagine that a customer is just calling the specific function on, for instance, you can, by doing so, build a bridge to actually move DAI tokens from the mainnet to the Loom network and use it in your Loom app. And that will be actually the content of the third tutorial. And fourth tutorial, how, based on these mechanics, build a simple gambling game with much less user friction, where despite the operation of sending DAI tokens to the gateway, you will need to perform no MetaMask transaction. So it will be like casino. You come to the casino with a cash, you change your cash to the tokens, casino tokens, and then you use freely and earn, lose casino tokens, and that's all happens in the area of casino, and just then you need to go back to exchange them back to money. So that kind of mechanics we will realize on the Loom network and main chain, and that will be the content of fifth and I think also sixth tutorial. So that's all for today. Thank you very much for your time. See you later.